married or in a committed relationship? Looking for real advice on having love and enriching your relationship? You are in the right place. Welcome to The Couples Expert with Stuart Fensterheim.
Hello, and welcome to the Couples Expert podcast. This is Stuart Fensterheim, the Couples Expert. Welcome to June. June is the month that people tend to choose to get married because it's so beautiful out there and allows that love that you have to just shine. I think every month of the year you can have that. But in June, you can have an outdoor wedding. So a lot of people choose June to get married. And that's why I decided to have this episode. This episode is on how do we deal with some of the issues in a relationship that may pull you apart, and to have a better understanding of what does get in the way of the two of you feeling close to each other. Some of that is related to our own personality and how we and our partners get together and what happens when there's conflict that tend to pull you apart instead of pulling you together. Because what we know, and what you guys have been visiting with me on this podcast week after week, is that my belief is that two people in a relationship need to have an emotional connection, and that emotional connection is what keeps you together and allows you to have a relationship that's exciting, where you both understand each other so well, and together you work as a team. One of the components of that is all of us having a good understanding of who we are, our personality, and how it mixes or doesn't mix with our partner. And that's why I brought on this show today a guest. Alex Swire Clark is a gentleman who I met online, and he and I have decided that what would be the best episode for us to do together is that what we're going to talk about is a model of human behavior. He's an expert, a certified human behavior consultant, and he uses a model of human behavior to help others really understand themselves better from a personality perspective. So what we're going to do is talk about that, particularly in light of how it may impact a relationship, but more importantly, a marriage. Because this information can lead to a positive change in which we communicate with our partners in a particular way, in their love language, and in their way, and they do that with us. And Alex is really a fun kind of guy, and what I know about him is that he taught sixth grade for 8 years, which means he's going to have a tremendous amount of patience and dedication. Someone who can do that, teach school for that long, for that age group, I just respect so much. He earned his BA degree in education at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Alex is also a passionate sports person, and one of the fun things that he does is he does a play-by-play radio voice for Furman University women's basketball team, but more importantly, he's also the captain of a paintball team. So he knows teamwork. So Alex is joining us today to really talk about some of these important things. And he lives with his wife and 5 children, which is another example of why he must have incredible patience. When he's not working, he just really is dedicating to helping teams really function together. So I know he's going to have something really exciting to offer all of us to help us with our relationship. So Alex, welcome to the Couples Expert podcast.
Thanks for having me, Stuart.
You and I were talking a little bit before we started recording, and I was mentioning to you one of the reasons that I wanted us to talk was both of us have been in the trenches with the school systems. And one of the things out here, at least, they just got through a strike. I don't know if you had that. You're in North Carolina, right?
That's correct. And so they are not allowed to strike by law in the state of North Carolina. So that is correct. Yes, sir.
Oh,
so
that's
unlike
interesting.
Michigan and other folks who can just walk out and petition and picket there, they're not allowed to do that here.
I don't think people out here would like to hear that.
No, sir.
What's fun is, as a podcaster and also as an ex-teacher or a recovering teacher, I like to call it, and also playing paintball, we were talking about the fact that in some ways it's very similar to marriages with regards to commitment and also with regard to keeping sometimes the feeling of, I better keep my head down because
That's true.
you don't know what's going to be.
That's right. Shoot or be shot. And we play a lot in the woods. So there's a lot of, flanking going on. There's a lot of camouflage involved. And we actually have earpieces that we wear so we know where everyone is on the field. And one of the big critical pieces of that is knowing your role on the field. I'm the captain of the team of about 25 guys and gals. And I'm not the best shooter, not even close. I'm probably in the lower fourth of the folks who shoot on my team. So my job is to kind of lead from the back or the middle of the pack versus someone else who might be a great shooter and say, come on, charge, let's go. And you follow in behind them. So everyone's got their role.
Just to get into our topic a bit, the role in a marriage isn't always so well defined, is it?
No, it's not. As a male who is more of a supportive type, my wife tends to be the one that I'm trying to please most of the time versus me laying down the hammer or whatever else, or this is what we're going to do kind of a mentality. So from the other guys in my life perspective, that might not be macho enough, but knowing and understanding the model we're going to talk about today, I'm very comfortable in my own skin, and we've made our marriage work for, going on 22 plus years now. So it's working.
I want to say congratulations when you said the 22 years, but I hesitate whenever I hear people saying that because it's such a sad place to say congratulations that you've been married 22 years as if it's something extraordinary as opposed to expected. And I think part of why I wanted to have our conversation today is because it shouldn't be that hard. And if we understand what goes into having an emotionally connected, healthy relationship, it's just following a guideline. And I think that what you have to offer today and the model that you're going to be talking about helps us both cognitively and emotionally. And I want to really get into how do you really keep all these roles straight, and how do you really have it really develop as a team of two people, both going after the same agenda?
It's a great question, Stuart. And again, I think you mentioned it earlier, is about knowing your role. So most folks are coming from, a single life where they've done their thing, whether it be, I went to college for 4 years or 5 years or 6 or however long it took you to graduate.
Really? And
then you say, okay, here's this, beautiful person, handsome person, whatever you want to call them, and I want to spend the rest of my life with them. But do we really know them? We look at shows like, these reality TV shows and things like, The Bachelor and The Bachelorette and those kind of things, and these artificial worlds that they create, and they think that there's a relationship based on that, but clearly there's not. And so we have these romanticisms about what a relationship should be like. And so from our perspective, back when we were married in 95, reality TV didn't exist. But what our reality was is, we were young and I was a teacher and my wife was in grad school and we weren't making a whole lot of money. We were in this tiny little apartment and trying to then discover ourselves, who we were in the real world around all of these other things. So we, had the same problems that other couples did. And so I guess around 1997, we were starting to not go our separate ways at all or anything, but, just start to having those end of the honeymoon kinds of things that go on in typical marriages. And so for our perspective, it wasn't good enough. And so we sat down on the edge of the bed one night and my wife was crying and I was crying a little bit. And she said, well, I just don't really understand why you do some of the things you do. And I said, I agree. I mean, I don't understand why you can't be more spontaneous. And she said, well, I can't understand why you don't have a good sense of direction in terms of where you want to go with your life. And I said, well, I just kind of go with the flow. And so we would go back and forth with that and trying to impose our own lens, our own kind of personality lens of how we view the world on each other. And so we struggle with that. In 1997, the summer of, I met a gentleman by the name of Dr. Robert Rome, who's the founder of Personality Insights out of Atlanta, Georgia. And he introduced me to this concept of DISC, this personality styles. And he introduced it to a camp that I was working at as a camp counselor. And all the students kind of took the model, found out who they were, and he invited the counselors to do the same thing. And so I did. And I was like, oh, man, this describes me to a T. This is wonderful. And then my second thought was, this is not my wife. So I said, well, let me have one of these assessments, Dr. Rome, so I can give it to her. And so I took it home. I was so excited about it. She sat down and she took the assessment. And we came to find out that based upon where you are on this graph, we are complete, Stuart, complete, total opposites. I mean, you can't be any 180 degrees apart further than we are on this graph. So we took this information and understood that, okay, I'm more of a supportive guy. So when you say, honey, what do you want for dinner? And I say, I don't care. It's not that I don't care. I just want to be supportive and make you happy. So I really just don't have a preference. That's the way I should phrase it.
As opposed to, and I think what happens for a lot of folks in a situation like you described, it's going to be defined as you don't care enough to give me your feelings about something.
That's right. It's not apathy. It's actually the opposite of that. I care so much that I want to make you happy and have something that you want to do. So what would you like to eat? And then you get into the discussion of, well, I don't want to make the decisions all the time. Well, when you make a decision, you're happy because when I suggest something, normally you say you're not in the mood for that. So, then if you'll just go ahead and pick something, we can move on.
Today's podcast is sponsored by Before You Tie the Knot, 12 Essential Conversations. Planning a wedding and a future together can be stressful, and the couples expert is here to give you a little bit of relief. Whether it's now or in the future, the decision to marry is one of the most important decisions you'll ever make. We don't know what we don't know, so I've produced a 12-week course for you and your partner called Before You Tie the Knot, 12 Essential Conversations to Have Before You Marry. There isn't a lot of premarital training and education out there, so I've created 12 modules that address the challenges you and your partner are likely to face as you enter into married life. This course is taken at your pace. There's no time pressure, and I've included some fun challenges and bonus exercises for you and your partner to explore and learn together. I'll be lending support as you go through the course by live Q&A sessions and discussions in a Facebook group exclusively for those of you going through the program. Before You Tie the Knot covers many of the issues and discussions that couples need to have before they get married, included family planning, finances, work-life integration, spirituality, and more. Go to www.thecouplesexperts.com for Before You Tie the Knot and find out what you need to know for a successful and happy marriage. As you're describing the DISC model and beginning to sort of talk about that, could you let people, the listeners, sort of have a good feel of what does DISC stand for and what are the different types of personality styles that you're referring to?
Absolutely, absolutely. So if everyone of course, if you're driving, don't do
this while you're driving.
When you get home or whatever, just take a napkin, sheet of paper out, and draw a big circle. Okay, and so on the top of that circle, you write the word outgoing, and then on the bottom of the circle, you write reserved. And so you'll take your pencil and just say, okay, normally in most circumstances, do I feel like I'm more of an outgoing or reserved person? Do I like being around others, getting out in front of people, or am I more of a kind of away from people, maybe a little more shy than other folks? And so kind of put a little dot either towards the top or the bottom. And then from there, you talk about, okay, am I more people-oriented or am I more task-oriented? In other words, do I get my energy from being around other people, maybe in a quiet way, but just, amongst others? Or do I get more energy and satisfaction from completing tasks? Like if I start my day with 20 items, it's 7 o'clock at night and there are only 17 of those completed. Is that nails on a chalkboard for me? Because if it is, you're probably task oriented because you want to get all 20 of those things done before tomorrow starts. Right. So once you've done that, you can take your dot and say, okay, well, if I'm more task oriented, now I know that I'm reserved and task oriented. That makes me a C or a cautious type. If I'm outgoing and task oriented, which is at the top left corner, then I'm more of a D or a dominant type. If my dot is in the upper right hand corner, I'm more of an I type, which is an inspiring type. That's outgoing and people-oriented. And then the final one down the bottom right-hand corner is what we call our S, is our supportive type, and they're people and reserved. So everyone is a unique combination of these. No one's just an S and no one's just a D. In fact, most people are at least two of these blends in terms of what you predominantly present to others and what you are basically that style in your own personal environment. So from that perspective, if you want to define a little bit about the characteristics of those, it's pretty simple to do. So for those folks in the upper left quadrant, again, those are the Ds, which we call our dominant style. They are going to be dominant. They are direct. They're demanding of themselves and others. They're decisive. They make quick decisions. That whole ready, fire, aim.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, Sally, I'm sorry. Oh, collateral damage, that kind of thing.
Really?
They're the determined people. They love challenges. They're doers, but sometimes they can be a little defiant. Those are the words we use to kind of describe D's, our dominant style. Then we have our I's. We were the inspiring types. They're influencing, impressionable. They're interactive. They're impressive. They're involved. They like being around people. They're the smiley people. They're the folks when you're in school, if you put a red star beside their name on the chart, they're doing the happy dance like, woo, I got a red star. They're excited about it. But sometimes they can be a little illogical, and I'm one of those high I people, so I can claim that illogic for myself. Then again, that bottom right-hand corner, those reserved and people-oriented folks are supportive, steady, sincere. They're sentimental. They're kind. They're pretty much status quo. Don't change things on them too much without letting them know, and they tend to be a little more shy. And then, of course, those folks in the bottom left corner, what we call our task reserve-oriented people, those cautious types, high Cs. They're cautious. They're all about numbers. They like to calculate things. They like to organize things. They're highly competent. They're conscientious and contemplative and consistent. So, again, everyone is a unique blend of those. But where we have the situations happen in relationships, Stuart, is when we're trying to determine, okay, once I know who I am, then I have to be able to understand the others around me. Because a lot of times in corporate America and things like that, people are going to take, Myers-Briggs and DISC and EQI and those kinds of things, but it stops with who am I? Mm-hmm. And that's only 50% of the equation when you're dealing with in a couple scenario. Right. Because you've got to understand the other person. So from a temperament standpoint, which is what we're talking about with DISC, that is the key in terms of understanding, okay, if I'm a high D, again, upper left quadrant, and I have a spouse who's in high S, that bottom right-hand quadrant, we're opposites. The way we're fueled is totally different because a high D is fueled by getting results. So during the day-to-day, they want to get things done, move. They're going all the time. And S, they're going to be slowing it down. They're all about peace and harmony. And Stuart, they're not driven.
But are they not driven, or are they driven in a different way? They're driven in a supportive way.
For example, if I have a high S child, now we're talking about couples, but let's just throw a child into a scenario. If I have a high S child, and that highest child is talking to or listening to or being advised by a high D parent, then that high D parent is not going to understand, why aren't you making A's? You're intelligent. I mean, look at your IQ scores. And the S's response is, well, I just don't really care about that. I care about music. I'm going to be a marching band director one day. I don't care. That's algebra I'm never going to use again. And this whole calculus thing, so, Well, why don't you keep your room nice and neat? Well, because that's just not something I'm into. So from that perspective, you get this clash of the things that fuel me don't have anything to do with what fuels the other person. So those S's are all about peace and harmony. As long as there's no argument going on, they feel good about things, and they will sacrifice some of their own wants and desires to please others to attain that peace and harmony. So in a marriage, I'm a high IS, so I'm a blend of I and S. I'm that totally on the people side. My wife is a CD, so she's totally on the task side. So in our relationship, we have quickly found out by having these assessments and doing this that I'm the guy who gets on the floor and rolls around with the kids and plays paintball with them and shoots the Nerf guns, and I'm the funsy guy. And then my wife is your homework done? Where's the paper we're supposed to have signed? And getting them organized for their day. Is their notebook organized? Do have everything in their backpack before they have to go to school? So we understand those roles. It's not that I can't do the backpack thing and she can't roll on the floor, and play with them, but we feel comfortable in those roles, and so we're confident and we're able to do those things on a daily basis.
But this is where I see with couples, could be a relationship burnout is what I like to call it, is because if you are a high D, and your partner is a high S. And so you go along your life together, and let's just sort of with a traditional sort of relationship perhaps, is the wife is doing all the homework with the kids, the husband's coming home, sitting around not helping. And then the wife gets to a place and say, well, what am I? Why aren't you helping me out? And then you get, well, it's not really something that I really enjoy doing, because they are much more interested in the supportive role. How do you balance those two needs in a situation like that?
Well, it's all about understanding. And so again, if you don't have this knowledge, there are stereotypical roles that couples typically fill. As you said, the guy is usually the breadwinner, comes home and expects things to be done, or, just wants to relax for a little bit. And then the wife is, again, stereotypically or traditionally more of the caregiver, provider, and that type of mentality. And so, we've had these roles for so long, but now we have this knowledge coming out, from all this emotional intelligence research that says that that's not necessarily the case. And so in our marriage, the opposite is true. I'm not the homework guy, but I am the, let's go rah, rah, sis, bim, bah cheerleader. And I am the supportive guy. So when my kids want to talk to someone about their feelings or if they've had a bad day, they typically come to me because I'm going to be the guy who's the high S, who's going to be supportive, that listener, not going to judge them and just kind of make sure that they understood that they're loved. And I'm the hugger and I'm the touchy-feely guy. I mean, Stuart, I cried at the movie Tangled. Man, right. Who does that? Where even in the movie is there a place? Well, when she's out there in the boat and she's with Flynn and there's the lanterns going up. That's the only thing she ever wanted. And then my 15-year-old leans her head on my shoulder and she starts crying and then I start crying. So, it's okay. Again, you've got to understand, though, who you are and be comfortable in your own skin and then be able to adapt yourself to others.
This is the question I think a lot of folks listening are going to have. Okay, we have ourselves identified. It doesn't feel like a match because we're so different. And what we need to do is to be able to then have a conversation about how do we merge these two together so both people feel important and valued.
That's right. So the differences actually are complementary. So when you take an assessment, and you see on page 4, we have what we call the complementary style. So in other words, if you're looking at the whole circle, in terms of if you've got both parts of that circle together, you're going to have all of those personalities covered together for your children and for each other. Mm-hmm. So because if my wife is a DC, she's going to be task oriented, but she's not going to be as empathetic as I am. But then she's also going to be more organized than I am. I mean, I can't keep my shirt on backwards, straight, whatever. Don't know what shoe size I am. So she takes care of all that stuff. And she's okay with that because she knows that I'm the empathetic one. If she needs to come in and talk to me about a bad day, she knows I'm going to be listening. So we make that circle whole because we are so opposite. So it's not a matter of being so different that it's a problem. We're so different and it's a positive thing. You follow where I'm coming with that?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that I would want people to also understand is where it sort of really plays out is in your communication with one another. Because if you're talking to someone who's more of a dominant person, you're going to talk much more from a task-oriented description of what the issues are, and then vice versa. Do I have that right?
You are spot on, Stuart. That's one of the things I talk about in my podcast. We have one that's just about reading people's styles through email. Just if you're going to use the nonverbal side of things, then we can go verbal in just a minute. But from a nonverbal communication, if you said, hey, did you get my proposal? A high D answers that question in an email. Got it. Thanks. Mm-hmm. That's it. You're not going to get, oh, it was great or anything, because they answered the question. You asked them a yes or no question, they answered and they're gone because they are, again, direct and they're doers and they're moving on to the next thing. A high I would say something like, yes, I received it, looking forward to reading it, with an emoji at the end.
Right.
And again, that's even in business email because eyes want to express themselves in ways that simple words can't allow through the medium of email because it's cold and it's sterile. So they start to add things to let you know how they truly feel. And an S is going to be, oh, yes, I received you. I'm sorry I haven't gotten back with you. I'll get back with you soon. So they're almost apologetic in their tone because, if it was 24 hours ago, they're going to be thinking that you might be offended that they haven't responded. So they're more concerned about your welfare than their welfare in terms of where they are with that whole sales cycle. And then the C would be, yes, I received your email. I will return it with my comments in light blue. I'll be looking over it tomorrow at 1 p.m. You can expect my response by 3.
Right.
Whoa, man, that was too much information. How about just, I got it and we're good to go. So they're going to give you all the information that you may or may not have wanted because their goal, again, is clarity.
Right. And I think where we're really going with this, which is really of high value, is when we talk about learning each other's, whether you call it love language, whether you call it just communication, or whether you call it knowing what each of you needs to feel loved, how we communicate that and learn what each partner may need to then feel that connection is really where this information gets very valuable, because then you have to start talking about, you have this style, I have that style. Now, what do we do to blend the styles?
Right. And you were talking about with Lauren in a previous podcast about dealing with folks with chronic illnesses and how that changes the dynamic.
Right.
The same thing applies here when you're talking about, let's say you've got a high I with a high C spouse. For me, we went on a cruise, I guess back in December. And as a high I want to be around the other people on the ship. So I'm the guy who's going and, playing mini golf with the kids. And I'm the guy who's going to the Harry Potter trivia contest. I only lost by 1 score, but by the way. So I'm the guy who's
Sounds like a carnival
there.
Cruise.
Well, yeah, it was, I think it was Norwegian.
Oh, okay.
So I'm involved with all that kind of stuff. My wife is a high C. Where do you think she was, Stuart? She wasn't at the Harry Potter trivia contest.
No, definitely not. Where was she?
She had a book on the back of
the library,
in the adults only section where there wasn't a lot of noise, so she could retreat, and that was her way of gathering energy. So my way of getting energy, again, it's all about that. Are you people or task oriented? My way of getting energy was being around others. Her way of getting energy was being alone.
And here's where I would go with that from a relational standpoint is it would be very easy if people are struggling a bit in that exact scenario that you just described, for you to be offended that she's in the library. How dare you go away? We're as a family, you're rejecting us. But if you understand that it's not rejection, that it's a personality style and a comfort, it becomes, we can share this. I can do stuff with the kids over there, and later we can go to the library together, and sometimes you do this and sometimes you do that. There's an ability to really not make things bigger than they are.
That's right. And then you can meet in the middle. So again, like you said, when you're planning things, sometimes you might be planning to, swim with the dolphins, but then sometimes you might be going to a museum, which is a little bit more intellectual, a little more lower key. But again, you understand yourself and others. And so like, I know all my kids' styles. So I know that, if I've got a high D child, who my oldest one is, I know that she's going to always be doing things and constantly on the go, and she's going to be overscheduled, and she's going to have flute lessons and voice lessons, and she's going to be on a talent show, and she's going to be doing and all these kind of things. And that's how she gets her energy versus my high S kid, who's just going to come home and he wants to just kind of play on the PlayStation with his friends online. And if they get a win as a team, he's all about that. But he's not worried about, trying to overschedule, overcommit. He's, just kind of a go with the flow type of person.
How do you think this could relate to people in their intimate life?
From that perspective, you're going to have to understand that reserved people, those C's and S's, are not going to be outgoing in terms of, let's be intimate tonight or making a big deal about it. Like as a high I, or a high D, they're going to be more of a big production. Let's do some surprise stuff. Hey, let's do a weekend getaway here, that kind of thing. And so the C's and S's are going to be more relational in how they show that from a more quiet way. Hey, I prepared a nice meal for us tonight. Or, hey, sweetheart, I got you this new set of books that I know that you've been wanting to get, but you just, didn't want to spend the money on yourself. So I got that for you.
Or the difference of spontaneity and not spontaneity too. Scheduling as opposed to doing it at a whim kind of thing.
Correct. And so from those C's and S's, you can't do too much on a surprise standpoint for them, because they're going to be thinking, oh my gosh, okay, so let's say you surprise them on a trip to New York. Yay, and we're leaving tomorrow. What? Okay, who's taking the kids to school? Who's got the tickets? When are we leaving? When are we getting back? What are we going to be doing there? Do I need to pack? And so it just goes all these questions versus a high I would say, oh, yeah, let's go. Woo. And they're just throwing stuff in a bag and they're out the door.
And that spontaneous sort of party becomes a love type. This is showing how much you love me. But if someone is more of a D or an I, that doesn't mean you care. It means you don't understand me. How dare you do that?
That's right. Ignorance is the word here, and ignorance isn't a bad word. Ignorance just means lack of knowledge.
Right.
It's just a series of ignorant moves that we make in terms of trying to find out who we are and understand the other person. Yes, we understand their favorite color is blue, and yes, we understand that they like, to go to races, or yes, they like to read. And that's where we stop. And that's all surface level stuff. We don't get down to the underneath part of how they're wired. And this personality style information really deals with how they're wired. And then you can connect with them. And then you can augment, like what you're talking about with the 5 love languages. And that kind of augments. They're all just data points. in this grand data set of who we are as unique human beings.
Well, I want to just thank you for coming on and really talking about, because this is really critical, because I really do believe knowledge is power. And that if we want to have a close relationship with our partners, we definitely need to have a relationship where we understand where they're coming from. So if folks want to really do some of this research for themselves or have a couple take this DISC assessment, what's the best way for someone to do that? And if someone has more questions about what we've talked about, what's the best way for them to reach you as well?
Sure. So they can go to thereportadvantage.com. On my reportadvantage.com website, you'll find a link to our store where they can purchase the assessments. The basic assessments are less than $15, so they're really inexpensive. And you can take those, and then if they will reach out to me by email at contact@alexswire-clark.com and just mention in the subject line, the couples expert, I'll send them a free interaction guide. And so what that will do is they'll buy their 2 assessments for themselves as a couple, and then I'll send them that interaction guide based on those 2 assessments, and that will give them real-time, real-world ways of working better together, what their strengths are, what their weaknesses are, and how they complement each other so they can really focus on themselves.
That's great. And all of that will be on our show notes. Like we said earlier, if you're driving, don't start writing this.
That's right.
I want to thank you again, Alex, and it's been a pleasure. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for giving of yourself, your time, your energy. One of the things that I see of high value for you. And please, all of you listening, thank you again for joining me on the Couples Expert podcast, and we'll see you again soon. Bye-bye now.
Thank you for listening. This episode has ended, but your journey continues. Head over to www.thecouplesexperts.com to access all the links and resources mentioned in this episode, as well as bonus content exclusive to podcast listeners. Enjoyed this episode? Why not hit subscribe now and never miss an episode?